First of all, I'd like to share a fact with you, and that is that Australia's Aboriginal cultures are the oldest and continuous living cultures in the world. And I always ask everyone who is at an event when I do the welcome to give a shout of praise. So could you all give a shout of praise in Noongar? And that word is Wurla. Beautiful. And the Noongar Nation is the largest cultural block in Australia, and so I think that deserves a shout of praise as well. Beautiful, thank you. And as I said, my name's Sandra Harbin and I'm a Whadjuk Noongar, and I also have connections to my Balladong people and some of the other groups in the Noongar Nation. And we do have 14 Noongar language groups, and it's important that we always acknowledge which language group we come from, because it's from those clan groups within our language group that we get our stories about our budja, about our land, and where we get to learn and we're taught and we know who our mort are, that is our family, and our clan groups from those families, and where we get our cultural kadijan, where we get our knowledge from. So I'm really proud to say, my language is from my Noongar elders. I'd also like to acknowledge my Noongar elders, past, present and emerging, and also extend that respect to other Aboriginal groups. So if you're from other country, pay my respects to your elders, past, present and emerging. And it's also important that when I have Noongar people at events, that I acknowledge them. And so I had the opportunity to see some of my mort, some of my Noongar family. So a special acknowledgement to David Collard, who's the CEO of the Whadjuk Regional Corporation, and to Kerry Ann Winmar, who is a board member of the Whadjuk Regional Corporation. And obviously they're going to have a really important role in the future of tourism in our Whadjuk Budja. So Kaya and Wanju to Whadjuk Noongar Budja, Ngan Kultis Jurapan to be Wanganin with Nunakurt. So hello and welcome to Whadjuk Country, and I'm really happy to be here. I'd like to acknowledge the Bridiers and their representatives, so to the bosses that have come here and helped make this event. And the Bridiers, they're both men and women from what I understand, so you know who you are. So pay my respects to you and the effort that you've put into making this event possible, and for us Noongar people to be attending here this morning. And I'd like to acknowledge the Quabrada Yorgas, the beautiful women in the room, beautiful, and I look around and see all the beautiful colours, and also to the Mridich Marman, so to the strong men that are here, and all sharing Kadijan here today, so sharing knowledge. I usually get people to join in and speak in the first language of this land as well when I do the welcome. So if you'd like to repeat after me, and if you haven't spoken Noongar, well, you're going to, but I do know that you all do know Noongar words, and I'm sure there's a lot of you that don't know that, but anyway, you're going to help me speak in the first language of this land. So Yarl Quabrada Wirn. So you've asked for the beautiful spirits to come here, and they're going to give us protection and safety while you're here on Whadjuk Budja. And Wurtkol Warawirn. And so you've asked for the negative spirits to leave, because obviously we want to create a beautiful energy here, and ask for the Noongar spirits to keep us safe while we're on country. And I'm going to warbin in the Quabrada Wirn also to ensure that you have a Mridich Cart, a strong mind, a Quabrada Court, a good heart, and a Mridich Wirn, a strong spirit. So Kaya and Wanju to Whadjuk Noongar Budja. And as we say, we don't say goodbye, we just say Budawan. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra Harbin, for that wonderful welcome to country. I'm going to be going whoa all day long. Good morning, everyone. Kaya. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Budja on which we meet today, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I also pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm Jessica Strutt, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here today for the launch of the Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre and Tourism Research Cluster Go Your Own WA Recovery and Regeneration for the Tourism Industry in Western Australia report. I'd also like to acknowledge our distinguished guests, Jessica Shaw, MLA, Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Premier and Minister for Tourism, Meredith Hammett, MLA, Member for Mirrabooka, Matthew Hughes, MLA, Member for Kalamunda, beautiful spot, best seat. Senior leaders from Bankwest and Curtin University and across the West Australian business community, welcome to you. And it's also fantastic to have some students with us from Greenwood College over in the naughty corner there. Hello and welcome. Looking forward to some questions from you for the panel later on. Very welcome. Lovely to see you. Our presenters on the report we're launching today are Dr. Daniel Kiley, a Senior Research Fellow at the Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre, and Associate Professor Michael Volger, Co-Director of Curtin's Tourism Research Cluster. A little later on, following their presentation on their report, I'm going to facilitate a discussion on some of the key aspects of the report with an expert panel. On the panel today, we've got Carolyn Turnbull, Managing Director of Tourism Western Australia, Ryan Mosney, Co-Founder and Director of 2 Feet and a Heartbeat, I'm sure you've all been on their tours, and Karen Priest, Principal at Smart Talent Training and Recruitment Company. So some good insights from our panel today. Before we kick off, just a little bit of housekeeping. Please remember to maintain physical distancing where possible and practice good hygiene. We kindly ask that if you're not feeling well, just let one of the event staff know and they will come and assist you. If you haven't already done so, can you please turn your phone to silent? Better make sure mine is when I get back to the desk. And toilets are very well marked at the back of the room there. So if you haven't already found them, toilets at the back. In the unlikely event of an emergency, please stay calm and follow the instructions of the event staff and wardens. And I'm told the wardens can be easily identified by their red, yellow or white hard hats. A little about the report before we hear about the detail from the experts. As I said, the report launch, it's titled Go Your Own WA, Recovery and Regeneration for the Tourism Industry in Western Australia. It's the 7th report in the Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre's Focus on Industry series. This report has been prepared by the Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre in collaboration with Curtin's Tourism Research Cluster. This report examines the dynamics of the tourism industry before and after the COVID-19 crisis, and it outlines the road to recovery for the sector in Western Australia. This report includes findings from a statewide survey. It was conducted in December 2022 and also in January 2023, so very recently. And the survey is all about better understanding residents' perceptions of tourism throughout the various tourism regions of Western Australia. The information gathered from these avenues provides novel and also obviously very current insights on the tourism sector in Western Australia with the aim to help inform policy making and also support sustainable tourism development in this beautiful state of ours. As we're learning about the report's findings today, make sure you send your best questions through to Slido. We've used this before. If you haven't and you're not familiar with Slido, go to www.sli.do. That's www.sli.do. So we're doing it through Slido today. You can download the app, and the event code you need, hashtag TourismWA. How apt. We would also love you to get involved on Twitter, if you're still on there in this Elon Musk time. What you can do on there is you can share with everyone. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? Who's best dressed? I don't know. If you want to do that, the handles for today's event on Twitter are at Bankwest Curtin at Tourism Cluster. So there's two handles, at Tourism Cluster and at Bankwest Curtin, and include the hashtag TourismWA. I now invite Jason Chan, Executive General Manager of Bankwest, to the stage to officially welcome you all. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thanks for that welcome, Jess. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we meet today, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I too pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm delighted to be here this morning to introduce the first BCEC report launch for 2023. It's St. Gallen's, it's March already, and the time seems to fly. Bankwest has been part of the fabric of WA community for over 127 years. And given our long history in WA, we aspire to partner with groups that make a difference to the communities that we live, work and play in. Our relationship with Bankwest Curtin Economics Committee extends over 10 years, and we're proud to have played a part in building the BCEC into an incredible nation-leading research institution. It's an exciting time at Bankwest. We're building a bank to meet the rapidly changing customer needs. We're transforming our products and services and realise our vision to be a simple, easy bank for the Australian homeowner of today and tomorrow. We want everyone to have an opportunity to purchase their piece of the great Australian dream here in WA or nationwide. We're proud to be WA's largest domiciled mortgage lender with 3,000 locally based colleagues, transforming into a digital, future-fit, WA-based business, punching above its weight on a national level. We all know WA is a great place to live, and that's why Bankwest and the CBA Group is committed to growing our workforce both in Perth and regionally, allowing people to live and work in the communities that they love. We are going to build skills in key areas like technology, data science and financial crime to meet the challenging customer needs. Therefore, we want to see more people visit WA and encourage many of them to stay and make it home. So I welcome today's report. We know how important the tourism sector is to our economy and to the communities across our state. And as today's report reveals, we know we haven't realised the full potential. And we have a great opportunity to showcase why WA is not only the best place in the world to visit, but it's also the best place to build a life, a family and a career. So thank you to the team at the BCEC, in particular report co-authors Dr. Daniel Kyle and Associate Professor Michael Vogger. I look forward to hearing the panel and the report insights and the panel to follow. It's my pleasure to welcome our guest speaker for today, Jessica Shaw, MLA. Jessica is the State Member for Swan Hills and Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Premier and Minister for State Development, Jobs and Trade, Tourism, Commerce and Science. Since entering state politics in 2017, she has been Chair of the Parliament's Economics and Industry Standing Committee and has previously served in the Culture and Arts, Heritage, Child Protection, Prevention of Family and Domestic Violence, Women's Interest and Communities portfolios. Please join me in welcoming Jessica to the stage. Thank you.
Kaya Wanju. Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here on the behalf of the Deputy Premier and Minister Tourism, the Honourable Roger Cook. He does send his apologies for not being here this morning himself, but his loss is my gain. Can I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and thank you, Sandra, for your welcome to country. We greatly appreciate it. Can I also acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues, Meredith Hammett and Matthew Hughes, with whom I have the great privilege to share a fair portion of the Perth Hills, one of Western Australia's prime tourism destinations. The Tourism WA Chair, Di Bain, and board members over to the left here. The CEO, Carolyn Turnbull, and Rebecca Brown is the CEO. There's a faux pas, that's career limiting. Because some may think she's probably more my boss than Roger sometimes. So the CEO, Rebecca Brown, and Managing Director, Carolyn Turnbull and board members, and the John Curtin Distinguished Professor Alan Duncan, Director of Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre. And there are so many other very important tourism stakeholders in the room, and welcome. Can I say what a genuine pleasure it is to be here? I did, when I was, after the last election, for about a year, support Minister Templeman in the tourism portfolio. I then wandered off and did some other things, but it is a portfolio area I'm very passionate about. In the first term of as being a member, we chaired, we did a couple of inquiries into Airbnb, into regional airfares. I live in the Swan Valley, and the Swan Valley is a key tourism destination, and so it is a portfolio that I really do have an abiding interest in. So about our tourism sector. After reconnecting with the world in March 2022, the tourism sector in WA is returning bigger than ever. Latest statistics from Tourism Research Australia show for the year ending September 22, 10.5 million overnight domestic and international visitors travelled to and within WA. The same figures show the number of international visitors heading to WA is at 84% of pre-COVID levels, meaning our state's tourism industry continues to recover and grow further. Pleasingly, latest monthly stats from February 23 show our interstate tourism sector is thriving, with around 1,650 interstate flights into WA, which is 102% of the pre-COVID figure. One of the reasons that visitors are flocking to our state is due to our blockbuster calendar of events. Post-COVID, Tourism WA is sponsoring a diverse calendar that will drive tourism and showcase Perth as a global events capital. These events will profile WA to key international markets to restore visitation to pre-COVID levels. And we've had some very recent success. I'm sure everyone was aware of UFC 284 that brought 9,000 out-of-state visitors into Perth, just showcasing WA. And it was so popular that it broke the national arena revenue record that was set by the Rolling Stones. So these guys are bigger than Mick Jagger. He might have a thing or two to say about that, but it's just the start of many fantastic events that Tourism WA have planned. And we're committed to building on this success, demonstrated by our record budget commitment of $167 million dedicated to Tourism WA. That figure includes $31 million to attract major events and business events to WA, $21 million for a 2-year marketing boost internationally and interstate, and an $18 million commitment for a national park tourism experiences development package. All of these funds are being used to attract more visitors, support local businesses and operators, and boost the economy to create jobs and secure more business and investment opportunities. The $167 million budget commitment was additional to the Reconnect WA package, which included $195 million in support for tourism, including a boost for interstate tourism, aviation, working holiday makers, and international students. Before the pandemic, as we heard from Jess, the tourism industry in WA accounted for nearly 100,000 jobs and $13.5 billion in visitor spend to the state's economy, including almost $6 billion to the regions. Our plan is not only to return to, but to exceed these figures. A key part of this plan is to sustainably showcase our rich cultural heritage, our breathtakingly beautiful natural assets. Through Tourism WA's National Park Tourism Experiences Development Program and our GINA plan, Tourism WA is working to grow the diversity and density of visitor experiences, assuring they align to visitor expectations in a post-COVID world. Activating national park infrastructure and enabling the establishment of unique tourism experiences and accommodation in and around WA's natural assets is a key focus for Tourism WA in partnership with the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions. The government is also in the second year of delivering the 4-year GINA WA Aboriginal Tourism Action Plan, with 69 actions to be delivered across 8 government agencies and WATOC. Delivery of these initiatives is intended to increase the participation of Aboriginal people in the tourism sector, grow the inventory of quality cultural tourism experiences, and also position WA as Australia's premier destination for authentic Indigenous tourism experiences. We, of course, all know about the Walking on the Dream marketing campaign that was launched by the Premier and Deputy Premier, and it is delivering dividends. The latest Tourism Research Australia data for the year ending September 22 shows 10.5 million overnight visitors travelled to or within WA, and 20 million day trips were taken. Together, these visitors spent $12.2 billion in the state, which is $1.2 billion or 9% behind pre-COVID numbers. We do acknowledge that. But the national decline for the same period was negative 12%, showing that WA is performing better than Australia as a whole. The latest results for the month of November from TRA and the Department of Home Affairs show that WA residents continue to travel within the state at record numbers, as I'm sure I don't need to tell many of the people in this room, with the number of overnight trips taken at 94% of pre-COVID levels and spend 56% ahead of pre-COVID levels. Of all states, Western Australia saw the largest growth in both intrastate trips and intrastate spend. Interstate visitors recovered to 62% of pre-COVID levels, while spend recovered to 95% of pre-COVID levels, as visitors stayed on average 2 nights in the state. And international visitors recovered to 63% of pre-COVID levels, in line with the Australian average of 62%. Talk about blind you with statistics. I'm given these notes, I don't write them myself. Future indicators show that international bookings into WA will continue to recover into the first quarter of 23, whilst interstate bookings are exceeding pre-COVID levels. To stimulate visitor demand, we'll continue on with our amazing Tourism WA brand campaign, Walking on a Dream, which was inspired by WA's unique culture, elevating the profile of Western Australia as a unique destination within a highly globally competitive marketplace. The West Australian Government has a clear vision for the state's tourism sector. However, we do acknowledge that it's important to learn from the pandemic and to further strengthen the industry where we can. We know there was a boom of intrastate tourism during the pandemic, with the TRA data showing the number of intrastate visitors grew by 1% and intrastate visitor spend grew by a massive 21% compared to 2019 figures. COVID allowed more people to explore their own backyard and travel to WA's different regions, such as the Coral Coast, Southwest, Northwest and Golden Outback. Our regional areas and Perth all have so much to offer guests. I'm excited to learn from today's tourism report launch, and I thank the Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre and the Tourism Research Cluster, who I've collaborated with on a number of projects now, for their work in compiling this important document. The findings from the statewide survey in particular will provide a much better understanding of Western Australia's perceptions of the tourism industry and highlight those areas in need of support and improvement. We're determined to see the sector expand and to become more resilient into the future. So thank you very much for inviting me to the report launch. Congratulations on completing the important work. Enjoy the stunning venue. I'm glad that the curtains are closed. It was getting a bit hot up here. And I will pass back to Jess, who'll introduce our panellists. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jason Chan, for the warm welcome, and also to Jessica Shaw for those opening remarks. We're actually going to now sit for a while and have a little breakfast and let all those statistics sink in, Jess. There's a lot there. Thank you to the Minister's Office for providing those for you. Very informative. So yes, please, we're going to just take a short break now and enjoy your breakfast. Enjoy. Welcome back, everyone. That was the world's shortest breakfast break, because I know you're all mathematicians, so you've got all those figures sorted. We're going to just continue eating and get on with the morning so that we can really make the most of the facilitation and panel discussion. But I will ask you to keep the noise down when we are hearing the presenters, if that's okay. If you can please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Daniel Kiley, Senior Research Fellow, Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre, and Associate Professor Michael Volger, Co-Director, Curtin's Tourism Research Cluster, to present the report's findings. And as I say, please continue to eat.
Thanks, Jessica. I would also like to welcome you to this morning's event. I'd like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on this morning, and extend my thanks and respects to elders past, present and emerging. Michael and I will take you through some of the key findings from the Go Your Own Way report, the 7th in BCC's Focus on Industry series, with a focus on recovery and regeneration for the tourism industry in Western Australia. This report was conducted in collaboration with the Tourism Research Cluster at Curtin University. I would also like to acknowledge the remaining members of the team that significantly contributed to this report, and thanks to key stakeholders and residents across the regions and data custodians for their valued contribution and steer. WA has a climate, a diversity in environment and pristine settings with unique flora and fauna to support globally unique tourism experiences and opportunities to develop a more diversified economy. Globally, the tourism industry has been heavily impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Response measures to contain the spread of the virus led to border closures and to massive disruptions at the local level, but also through interstate and international travel. Reopening of borders is not as simple as turning a tap back on. Travellers require time and resources before they decide to visit, and tourism businesses have to prepare for an increased intensity of travel, including operating in what is a relatively tight labour market. The pandemic has provided the sector with an opportunity to reset and to grow in a sustainable manner. I will now hand you over to Michael, who will take you through recent visitor trends. Michael.
Thanks, Daniel. I will now be sharing a few more stats with you, so please bear with me. In order to identify recent tourism demand trends during the period of the COVID-19 pandemic and coming out of COVID, we have reanalyzed Tourism Research Australia data from the national and international tourism visitor surveys. Domestic visitation is of course very important, as it is the greater chunk of Australian tourism. In most other states, in particular in New South Wales and Victoria, there has been a notable decline in domestic overnight visitors. But Western Australia performed well in this department throughout the pandemic. Across Australia, business travel has been among the most affected categories, remaining more than a third below pre-pandemic levels. But again, Western Australia showed greater resilience, with business trips and even recorded a growth in holiday trips. However, WA's tourism regions have seen varying results. While Perth lost about 30% of its tourism spend in the southwest and the Coral Coast increased by 14% and 22% respectively. Looking at the orange trend line, we can see that the number of domestic trips have improved in the months since April last year, but they remain slightly below pre-pandemic levels. Looking at the monthly domestic arrivals for Western Australia, it is evident that only 2020 underperformed substantially. WA recorded a much quicker recovery from then onwards compared to the rest of Australia, which saw a second decline halfway through 2021. In WA, there were even some months in the second half of last year, in orange here, when domestic arrivals exceeded those recorded in 2019 for the first time. Even more importantly, there was a strong increase in visitor spend, and that's what we're after, up 1/5 to a half in recent months compared to pre-COVID levels. Now to international arrivals. They showed similar trends across all Australian states, unsurprisingly, collapsing in 2020 and restarting to recover in 2022. Looking at trip purpose, it is clear that travel related to visiting friends and relatives, captured in orange, was the most resilient category, while holiday trips, here in light blue, were particularly affected. Here we are comparing international arrivals per month in 2019 in blue and 2022 in orange. While an uptick in international arrivals has commenced, it will still take some time to return to pre-pandemic levels. Roughly in line with global averages, Australia has recovered 62% of its international tourist numbers by the end of last year, with a slightly quicker recovery in WA sitting a few percentage points above the rest of the country. Interestingly here, there have been big shifts in source markets, broadly speaking away from most Asian markets towards New Zealand and other Western countries. Singapore and India are exceptions to this trend. India, indeed, tripled its share among Australian tourism source markets in the last 3 years. I think this is remarkable. It will need to be seen whether this shift in source markets is only temporary and short-term due to different speeds of border opening, of course, and also maybe diverging attitudes of tourists in terms of risk-taking. But now back to Daniel, who will discuss some economic contributions of tourism.
The tourism sector is everyone's business. It spans many of the traditional industry classifications, and as such, it is often difficult to capture the true value of the industry. The ABS and Tourism Research Australia have developed satellite accounts in an attempt to capture the full gross value add and employment contribution of the tourism sector. The tourism industry in Australia was valued at close to $60 billion in 2021, as we see on the left-hand side here. This is a 50% below the peak of $121 billion that was reported in 2019. The tourism industry contributed $12 billion to the WA economy in 2019, but fell 45% and now sits at $6.5 billion. Similar declines, of course, were observed in other states. As for tourism employment in WA, the right-hand side here, there were 56,000 people employed in tourism activities in 2021, down 15% from 2019 when the sector employed close to 70,000 people. Most of the decline since the start of the pandemic is assigned to Perth, which saw employment decline 37%. That's some 14,000 people. Some regional areas saw increases in employment in the sector over that time, with, for example, the Coral Coast up a quarter and the Southwest up 1/5. These areas were supported by intrastate visitors during the border closures. On the left-hand side here, we see that tourism expenditure in the Southwest declined in 2020 for sectors such as takeaway and restaurants, retail and accommodation services, but returned to growth in 2021. However, long-distance passenger transport continued to decline. Businesses in Perth suffered more, however. This was particularly evident in the retail and long-haul passenger travel sectors, with expenditure down more than half for the region over the 2 years to 2021. However, after controlling for inflation, monthly data does show positive signs, with tourism expenditure in fact exceeding that of pre-pandemic levels in the state.
Residents are a key stakeholder group in tourism, as they benefit from positive externalities such as jobs, and are also subject to some negative externalities such as potentially increased prices. We should not forget that residents are also a very valuable asset in tourism, and this makes their views critical for tourism development. We expanded a survey developed in partnership with Tourism WA and others in the context of the Australia Southwest Sustainable Tourism Observatory to capture residents' perspectives across all 5 tourism regions in the state. In close collaboration with close to 50 local governments, we distributed 2 online surveys. More than 1,200 respondents participated over 2 waves at the end of 2022 and at the beginning of 2023, so it's very current. Survey respondents were quite balanced between the genders and mostly on age, and they were also evenly spread across the income brackets. They were employed in a diverse range of industries, with 1 in 6 working in the accommodation, food or tourism services. Interestingly, more than a quarter of respondents indicated that their livelihood depends substantially on tourism. We asked Western Australian residents about their perception of the number of tourists visiting their region. before the onset of the pandemic and twice immediately before and after the most recent peak holiday period. Overall, 30 to 40% of residents feel the tourist numbers are about right, and a total of 60 to 77% feel they do not feel there is over-tourism in WA. However, a key point deserves attention. Tourism carrying capacities differ between places. When surveyed straight after the peak summer season, close to 50% of residents in the southwest felt there were slightly or clearly too many tourists in the region. I think it is reasonable to interpret this as an early warning signal for this particular region. On the other hand, in Perth, the situation is almost the polar opposite, where in November 2022, close to half of residents felt there were too few tourists in the city.
We were able to categorise the impact of tourism on residents into 4 domains. 2 of these relate to the perceived positive impacts of tourism. Economic benefits include factors such as additional investment, jobs and demand for local produce. The positive impact on local amenities includes the environment, transport and general atmosphere in the region. On the other side, the negative impact on amenities includes safety and health, the environmental footprint, and the negative impact on culture. The housing and cost domain includes housing and land prices, rental costs, and the costs of goods and services in the region. The vast majority of residents surveyed across all regions saw an economic benefit from tourism in both 2022 and 2023. For example, in 2022, the solid gold bars, 70% of residents in Perth believed that tourism attracted investment into the area. 3/4 felt that tourism captured more jobs, and 83% felt it made an economic contribution to the area. However, for Perth, the share of individuals with positive perceptions did decline across all economic benefit categories in 2023, the red bars. A similar decline was observed for Perth in relation to the perceived benefits to amenities in the city. In January too, Perth residents were more attuned to the negative impacts of tourism. However, for the southwest, a very different picture is painted in 2023. The summer holidays are, of course, a particularly intensive tourist period for the region. This is clearly displayed with an increased share of residents seeing an economic benefit between the 2 periods. A larger share of residents recognise the positive contribution of tourism to local amenities also during this time. However, residents in the southwest had a heightened awareness on the negative impacts of tourism in January. For all 5 of the categories in housing and cost impact domain, over 70% of residents perceived negative impacts from tourism, and 4 out of 5 residents felt that tourism created overcrowding in the region. And 3/4 of residents in the southwest perceived tourists to have a negative impact on house prices, with a similar share for rental prices.
Thanks, Daniel. Of course, these perceived impacts of tourism depend greatly on how we manage it. That's why we also asked residents to express their opinions on a range of management strategies. The 3 strategies that polled most favorably among residents are: engage with local communities, ensure local communities benefit from tourism, and create experiences that benefit both tourists and residents. In sum, it becomes clear that residents feel tourism is also their business. They would like to be involved, informed, and tourism to be developed in a manner that has their benefits in mind. Residents in some regions, such as again the southwest, but felt particularly strongly that tourism impacts should be monitored and visitors dispersed away from the hotspots and peak seasons. In line with findings discussed earlier, residents in Perth were instead the ones most in favour of boosting the number of visitors further. One issue that emerged very clearly from responses to the resident survey was the link between cultural tourism experiences on the one hand and other aspects of Western Australia's economic development on the other hand. The experiential value and educational benefit to visitors of cultural tourism was highlighted as one of the most distinctive propositions that WA can offer. I think we all agree on that. However, for some of the state's areas in particular, for example the Northwest, it is not possible to separate the quality of the tourism experience from the broader social and economic context. So the development of WA's tourism industry cannot take place without an active appreciation of these broader economic, social or health challenges faced by many First Nations people, both in regional centres and remote communities.
Given the immense potential of the tourism industry in Western Australia, accurate and timely forecasting of tourism demand is essential for successful planning, management and operations. The use of Google's real-time data is one important mechanism to track people's interests around the world in WA's tourism services. Here is an overview of trends in relative search intensity for each of Australia's major capital cities since 2019, based on searches under the travel category. In February, interest for Perth sat at 77, indicating that the worldwide internet search volumes for Perth are currently 77% of those prior to the pandemic. Search intensities clearly change with major events. For example, there was a dramatic fall in global interest in the first half of 2020 across all major capital cities. More recent trends show that the worldwide interest in travel to Australia has recovered steadily from 2022 onwards, thanks to vaccine rollouts and ease of border restrictions. We also see the strong recovery in interest in travel to Sydney from October 2021, coinciding with New South Wales ending its quarantine restrictions for international travellers. This chart compares the relative interest for Perth with Sydney, the blue line, and Perth with Melbourne, the gold line. As an example, a ratio of 50 here indicates that search interest for Perth is half that of the comparator city. These series show that worldwide internet search volumes for Perth are currently around a third of those for Melbourne. This is above the levels displayed pre-COVID. Search volumes are under a quarter for those compared to those of Sydney, but we are seeing an upward trend here as well. There has been some recovery in interest from March 2022 when WA's borders reopened, with further ground being made up over the last year. Our modelling shows that on average, a 50% increase in global interest about travel to WA will lead to an increase of around 130,000 visitors in the following year to the state. And this translates to $500 million in expenditure revenue for WA. This really emphasises the importance of marketing campaigns, such as the Walking on a Dream campaign. Marketing a strong WA brand internationally is essential for the sector's recovery.
In wrapping up, tourism is an important sector for economic diversification in WA, and its impact is remarkable. Before the pandemic, the sector contributed $12 billion to the WA economy and employed almost 70,000 people. COVID-19 has impacted the industry heavily, but at the same time, the industry has progressed pretty well on its road to recovery. As the recovery continues, it is imperative that national, state and local governments continue to support the sector and capture the opportunities for transformation to achieve an even stronger and more sustainable outcome. We developed a number of policy recommendations based on the various evidence bases of the report, including a Delphi survey conducted with a group of tourism stakeholders. Our respondents identified a number of strengths of WA tourism, such as the diverse natural environment, Aboriginal culture and safety. But in order to capitalize on these strengths, tourism needs to receive greater policy attention. Our evidence also highlights a requirement to promote genuine innovation in authentic tourism experiences, such as cultural tourism, nature-based tourism and events. But this does not mean carbon copying from somewhere else. It is paramount that WA strongly capitalizes on its unique characteristics and goes its own way, hence our report title. This call for innovation includes a need to support and guide the industry to achieve a more fundamental transformation towards sustainable operations. Stakeholders identified housing and workforce issues as the two biggest challenges for the tourism industry. They are closely related and need to be addressed as a priority with short-term, medium-term and long-term strategies, because it is of vital importance that a motivated and skilled workforce is available and also attracted to WA's regions. This means that we need to have a look at visa policies and also engage in more long-term considerations about the attractiveness of careers in tourism and hospitality. We need access to the state through flights and also transportation within the state. It is imperative to educate and inform both residents and visitors on the importance of respectful cultural exchange and respect for local environments. And this all needs to be accompanied by strong marketing and experiences. And here our respondents were again very clear in supporting bolstered funding to tourism organizations involved with product development and communication. Local residents' voices must be heard to ensure that the industry grows in a way that benefits everyone. Australia needs a community that genuinely and warmly welcomes our tourists, because this will be a differentiating factor in the fierce post-COVID-19 competition for travellers, but in particular for the high-value travellers that we are aiming for. So we can only hope that people will come together, implement some of these recommendations, because ultimately tourism is everyone's business. Thank you. Thank you.
Go Your Own Way, Walking on a Dream and a synth metal band. It seems like a music recovery to me. Thanks very much, Daniel and Michael, for those presentations on your Go Your Own Way report. There's a lot in this report. It's big, and we're going to thrash out further some of the key findings with the guest panel shortly. Now, just before we get them up here, I would just say, don't forget, you can be part of the discussion by getting on to Slido, www.sli.do, using that event code #TourismWA. There's already some brilliant questions coming through, some budding journalists in the room, evidently. Time to get the panellists up here for this discussion. Please join me in giving the panel members a warm welcome to the stage. Carolyn Turnbull, Managing Director, Tourism Western Australia. Ryan Mosney, co-founder and director of 2 Feet and a Heartbeat and founder of the Matagarup Zip Climb. And Karen Priest, Principal, Smart Talent. Come on, we can do better than that. I know it's Friday, but... I'm going to jump down here with you because I think it's better, so we can put on... Thank you. Brilliant. Welcome, thank you very much for coming. It'll be fascinating to get your insights. I want to kick off with the major finding, and I think it's got a lot of resonance watching around the room today. This issue with the report revealing housing affordability is also seen obviously by residents and stakeholders as a critical factor impacting on workforce and impacting on these labour shortages in the regions. Karen Priest, you do training and you do recruitment for the tourism industry, and you do a lot of that in regional areas. How does that finding sit with your experience trying to recruit people to regional areas of this beautiful state of ours?
Thanks, Jess. It's been interesting times. Obviously, the tourism industry took a great hit with, lack of staff over the COVID time and trying to recover. The challenge we have now, I must acknowledge state government for the drive to bring visitors from the UK, the current drive that's on, and it is working. I'm having a lot of people actually approaching me as a result of that campaign. But when I take them to customers out in the regions to fill those roles, there's a number of customers who are still questioning whether they would consider taking somebody on a working holiday visa. So that to me is one of the greatest challenges we face. We've got some fabulous people coming in, and I think we should all embrace it from our industry and give those people a chance, because I think they would be a great asset and they do want to come and work here. So that's one key area. The second one, if I may quickly, Jess, is accommodation, which we were acknowledging just now. So lack of accommodation, we might find people for the roles, but where are they going to live when they get to those regions? That's one of the biggest challenges.
Have you got any thoughts on, housing affordability and availability? There's no quick fixes unless we take a lot of dongers out to regional areas. Are there any short-term ways that you think government or others could assist with this housing affordability and availability issue? Karen?
I think that, engaging with local governments and communities to see what can be done in that local area. I think it is much more than that, though it's a mid to long-term strategy. I think certainly when there's new developments taking place, so especially larger hotel products and so on, that there should always be the opportunity to look at what staffing situation is going to happen and actually purpose-build accommodation for those new staffers. So an example, I've worked extensively in regional Africa. Every product that is built takes into account housing for the workers, just like the mining industry does, I suppose.
Ryan, the housing shortage isn't just in the regions, it's across WA and it's in the city. How does the staff shortage and skill shortage impact on your tour businesses? And specifically, in turn, what's the impact on visitor experience?
Sure. A lack of staff is obviously a huge challenge for any business. Operating, particularly a new business, and not having the number of people or the quality of people that you require to operate impacts on your ability to deliver, not only for your business itself to achieve the goals that you want to, but also to give the experience that you want to give to those guests who are here. So one of my businesses at the moment, we're only actually able to operate between 60 and 65% because we just don't have the volume or the quality of staff that we require. We're keeping our business at that level because if we were to go to 100%, it may compromise the ability of us to deliver at that level that we really want. We would rather have a smaller number of people coming through but deliver at a higher experience for the customer.
Which business is it that's...
That's the Madagar Bridge Climb and Zip Line. So it's obviously safety is our number one priority there, and we've literally had to go to the international market to try and find people, but then the housing shortage also flows on because you can maybe attract people here, but again, where will they stay? And is it attractive enough, the offer that you're making, to get them here, number one, but also will they have the lifestyle that they will want based on the accommodation that's available?
So in any given week, would you have very often people coming up, tourists wanting to go on that particular attraction and being turned away? How often would that happen?
Well, at the moment it's regular now because we are only operating at this 60 to 65%. The bookings are so far in advance. If you're a occasional traveler, somebody comes, hears about our product and then would like to just turn up and go, we just don't have the capacity to cater for that.
Carolyn Turnbull, the report also talks about, the staff shortage, workforce shortage impacting on visitor experiences, and we've just heard a first-hand account of that, having the potential to also then damage the WA brand, I suppose, both domestically and internationally. Do we have much evidence, hard evidence of that impacting, the shortage of staff and service level issues impacting on brand? And how do we manage any potential or real brand damage?
I think it's a really good question. And I think it's work in progress. It's a collective effort from all of industry. We know pre-COVID that of our 100,000 workers in this sector, that I think close to 30% was made up of international students, working holiday makers and skilled migrants. And so to Karen's point around employers hesitant to re-engage with international skilled migrants, I really would encourage the reconnection with this great pool of workers that are re-emerging to ensure that we are bringing those levels of service back up to where I think they were confidently sitting pre-COVID. And building on that return, I think it's great to hear from our colleagues at Jetsy and also Study Perth that the return of international students, which is around 20,000 to date, is a huge accomplishment from the international student segment. And I think this will also only bolster the enthusiasm from these students that are wanting to work part-time in this sector. We have, also a lot of initiatives within the a $3.9 million budget that was handed to Tourism WA in August of last year to really bolster local jobs for local people. So it's not all about just rebuilding that 30% from an international perspective, but really engaging in local workforce initiatives such as barista courses, really practical courses to get people engaged at that more day-to-day operational level. And then that call to action and working alongside partners such as AHAWA with a call to action website, so westernaustralia.jobs, which is a fantastic portal for job seekers and employers to really match those that are looking for these types of jobs in the hospitality sector. There is in excess of 2,000 jobs listed on that site. Actually, no, I think there's over 2,000 job seekers on that site and around 800 jobs listed. So there's certainly not a shortage of those that are interested in hospitality and tourism jobs. I think it's a matter of employers across the state really embracing all types of workers and embracing change as we move forward.
That reticence that you spoke about, Karen Priest, is it because the employer takes them on and then they know they're going to quickly move on, get poached, that you do all that effort, all that investment there, and then they're gone?
Yes, to an extent. That seems to be the largest sort of concern that they have. But I have had some interesting feedback from people saying, I could take that person, but they don't know about Australian labour laws, for example, or different excuses or reasons of why they wouldn't take somebody. And as we know, a number of these people that come in, they're here for their working holiday visa. They have to go and do their 88 days regionally, which they can do. But then, of course, many of them stay on for that second and third visa opportunity. And hopefully many of them also want to live in this beautiful state and become part of the fabric. So I think that, we need to give these people a chance, because we in fact might learn something from them. They come from a great service ethic. At the moment, I've got a lot of Italians, Germans, French, UK people wanting to come in. And I think they'd be, as I said earlier, a fantastic asset.
Brilliant. Ryan, one of the key figures that you picked up on in the report was that for WA, the share of intra-state visitors increased from an already high figure of 83.1% in 2018-19 to 93.7% in 2021-22. How does that sit with what you're seeing on the ground as a major tour operator?
We have traditionally always looked at making sure that we have a healthy mix of customers, and having local customers participate in your tourism business is really important. We've always viewed that anyone who travels more than a few kilometres to do an experience is a tourist, rather than looking at it as someone travelling from Bunbury or from Melbourne. We've seen in both of my businesses that intra-state is still the underpinning economic driver, with minor recoveries in interstate and international. Having that local element ties into the report, as Michael highlighted, that people want to be involved in tourism, and having products that actually attract local people really does bring them into the fold of tourism. So it's not something that's abstract or separate from their everyday life. It's something that they can actually participate in.
And the other trend you honed in on in the report was that in 21-22, 89, so nearly 90% of domestic interstate visitors to WA were required to travel by air. That's a very high figure, needing to arrive on a plane. So from your perspective then, Ryan, how critical does that make the recovery of the aviation industry to WA's tourism industry, recovery sort of post-COVID and this border closures?
It's obviously the number one thing for interstate and international travel. We need to not only recover the aviation access we had, but continue down the path that we were going on prior to COVID-19 to build further aviation access. It's sort of a problem that Australia will always face as an island, and Western Australia as a place far off on the west, but the larger share of inbound international flights that we can get, and truly building on that idea of the Western Gateway, I think the opportunities are massive, particularly with our near neighbours in Southeast Asia and in the Indian subcontinent, that those are markets that we can really capitalise on to cement WA as the place that you will enter into Australia, and that's going to benefit our tourism industry and the economy as a whole.
And Daniel, the report picked up on that. Can you tell us a little bit about that expanding, opening up, accessing up to new and emerging markets there in aviation?
Yeah, look, again, that's a really critical part. I think the piece of analysis we did on the Google searches is really interesting around that, and does show the impact that we can have through good branding, good engagement with international markets. China recently opened up their markets again. That market made up 7% of our overall international tourist visitors to WA. pre-COVID. So now that that market's reopened again, it's really critical that we re-engage with them. We don't miss the boat on that, because of course it's a massive population, massive middle class that has the potential to seek experiences like that we have to offer here in WA.
Carolyn Turnbull, of course, being one of the most isolated cities in the world, I personally think it has a lot of advantages. I like it. Obviously disadvantages too, and like we're hearing, obviously flights are critical. So, as we've heard, it's imperative that we get that direct access. Your background fits neatly here in the aviation industry with this new role in tourism. How are we going with getting these routes back up and running, and when do we expect routes to return to those pre-pandemic levels? What's the intel inside government? What are the latest stats?
Really exciting. I think that mystique about being positioned as an isolated destination can only build on the aspirational positioning of walking on a dream. But equally, we are so strategically placed with close access to our Southeast Asian destination partners. And as it comes specifically to aviation, working alongside Perth Airport, our narrative through our business cases is probably stronger than anywhere else in Australia with regards to our time zone, with regards to the feasibility and the profitability for many international airline partners to have that 24-hour turnaround. So the efficiency of aircraft mobility is also a really attractive aspect when airlines are reconsidering where they re-engage with their deployment of aircraft. So how are we tracking? We heard some terrific stats from Jess Shaw this morning around being 102% compared to pre-COVID levels for domestic aviation, and statistics are showing that we're sitting around 76% for international. I think 5 or 6 of our international partners are already tracking well ahead of capacity levels compared to pre-COVID, so that's really exciting. And those other airlines that are still catching up on capacity, we're working very closely alongside our Aviation Recovery Fund and ensuring that our cooperative marketing campaigns are very much driving those load factors and rebuilding the capacity. In addition, some of those airline partners that either haven't returned have been for good reason, where markets haven't been opened, but I'm really excited to share that ANA, our direct flights to Japan, will be recommencing in October, and other airline partners such as China Southern we are in close discussions with to ensure that we are re-engaging and reconnecting those critical markets as well. So really confident that our efforts are headed in the right direction. I still think that, at 76% to pre-COVID levels from an international perspective is really healthy. And I have no doubt that with our strong narrative, our prime location and all of those airline efficiencies that I mentioned, that Western Australia and the Western Gateway that Ryan mentioned sits as one of our key 3 strategic pillars at Tourism Western Australia. So access and delivering on the 95% point of contact. We know that 95% of all arrivals into Western Australia come via air. There doesn't go a day where we're not working on aviation connectivity with our cross-government relationships, whether that be JETSI, whether that be the Department of Transport and many other stakeholders that are really working on ensuring that we are reconnecting with the world at the earliest possible time.
Good to see some good signs there, thank you. I think it's time to hear from a student. What do you think? We've got a question down there. Someone from Greenwood College. We've got a handheld mic. Stand up, let us know your name and hit the panel up.
Hi, my name's Sydney, and my question was, what's being done to preserve the environment and reduce the environmental impact over time?
Good question. He's the editor of the West Australian in here. He might be offering you a job later on. Well done. I think we should go to one of the report authors on this first, just because, in a sense, these issues were raised. So potentially, Michael, could you start us off and then we might get a response from the guest panellists also. Well done.
Yeah, of course, the question resonates well with sentiment that is particularly prominent in some places in Western Australia. As we all know, in the Australia Southwest, the population is particularly keen on these sort of topics, and that came through very clearly. in the report as well. So once again, I think it is interesting to see that residents understand the positive impact of tourism, but at the same time, they also understand that that there are risks. So it all comes down to how we do tourism. So tourism is something good, but it depends on how we do it. I just came back from Borneo, and it was amazing to see that one conservation facility there can only run the operation because of tourists. So the CEO literally said 98% of the revenues come from tourists. So I was really, really impressed to see how tourism can make a difference in conservation. So this, for me, was once again an example to highlight that it all depends on how we do it.
Any of the other panellists like to add to this question? Very good question from Greenwood College.
I guess I'd just like to talk about seasonality, because that's in the report very much as well. And you touched on it earlier as well, Michael, in trying to disperse people further to those non-traditional hotspots. And I think we can perhaps achieve that through more varied itineraries and encouraging and educating people to go to other destinations and disperse them. And in the UK, there's a company called Low Season Traveller, and they are promoting destinations globally in the low season. And I noted that Australia is absent from that particular site. There are Pacific Islands, Asia's involved. But I think if we could encourage people to actually visit in the lower seasons, because some people would still be happy to do that, as long as it's not in the wet or something like that. But, you know, cooler temperatures for those people maybe living in the hotter climates, I think they would come here and visit then. And also just how the management is maintained around some of those natural attractions to enable that sustainability into the future is really key as well.
Carolyn, can we get your thoughts on that? How do we better promote areas and facilities and attractions in the off-season? I know we've had a bit of work that went on out at Rottnest to get people out there in the off-season. What other things are going on in this space, and what more can we do?
I think it's a really interesting question from the students around sustainability more generally. I think if we remind ourselves that we have a very conservative population base here in Western Australia, however, we have the largest landmass in the nation, and our 10,000 kilometres of unspoilt beaches, I think would have to go a very long way to create a concept of over-tourism. And I think the strategy set by the Board of Tourism WA is a high yield strategy as opposed to a high visitation strategy, and leaving a light footprint and ensuring that our contribution to community and our culture is prominent in everything that we do. We certainly are striving to ensure that the sustainability of our tourism sector is the most important factor. In terms of that regional dispersal and ensuring that there is a even spread of visitation, not just in those hotspots or more popular pockets, goes to our dispersal strategy. So whilst we definitely target Perth being the Western Gateway, and we saw from the statistics this morning that Perth is certainly a jurisdiction that wants to see more, equally we have such incredible nature and wildlife across our broad state that it's through our affordable airfare program that's really driving out the dispersal. And so we strive to ensure that we're attracting the right kind of travellers that have the desire to stay longer and disperse further and spend more in our regions. And I really feel that once you get out and explore this great state, it does become quite infectious. So I think filling those lower seasons and off-shoulder periods that Karen mentioned is certainly part of our strategy.
Google Trends, we talked a lot about that today, and the marketing, and we've heard the statistic a few times today that modelling suggests that an increase of 50% in Google search intensity has the potential to bring an additional 130,000 visitors to the state each year. We've been hearing about the optimism for Walking on a Dream, that marketing campaign, and now the video collaboration between Tourism WA and Eurovision Song Contest entrant WA synth metal band Voyager, which I had to listen to yesterday. If you haven't yet, do yourself a favour. Duran Duran, a bit of Duran Duran undertones there. Now, I've got to say, So I'm being sarcastic, but seriously, Carolyn Turnbull, I am interested in picking up on this idea. How much of Tourism WA's focus is on luring Google hits, search engine optimisation, intensity? Is that a really big space now in the tourism game, where the competition is at for tourists?
Absolutely. I think we know that having a strong online presence is as important to having a beautiful brand. And so, in line with our brand launch in September of last year, we also launched our incredibly beautiful westernaustralia.com. And we know that all visitors to that site, around 70%, reach us via search engine optimization via Google searches. That then leads to the leads, the leads that are going direct to our operators. So it's really important. So both SEO and SEM strategies are baked into the day-to-day activities of our digital team.
Any idea yet how well that synth metal band Voyager's going at,
Oh, look, we really
indications.
We're really confident, I think, about our homegrown talent between Walking on a Dream and now Voyager. I mean, gosh, what's next to come? But I think you would have seen the fun media coverage with Minister Templeman and Minister Cook getting right behind our local talent. So we're wishing them all the very best.
Yeah, loved it. A couple of your questions. Let's move on to some questions from the floor through Slido. These questions. This one's rated very highly, but maybe slightly controversial. With the potential of 130,000 visitors that we've just been talking about, what role can short-term rentals like Airbnb play in meeting strong demand for WA visits, especially in regional towns? Daniel, from memory, you looked at Airbnb in another report. Have you got any thoughts on this one? Michael, any thoughts on this one to start, to kick off while the guest panellists get their ideas together?
Yes, of course. It is all part of the bigger picture around housing and the workforce. And that's, of course, a complex area which has a number of pieces in the puzzle which should be looked at together. I think it just reinforces how much the destination space and the living space overlap, and we need to think them together. So I think this includes, of course, a look at holiday homes, how many holiday homes we have compared to permanent residents. What is being done with these holiday homes over the year? Are they used for long-term rentals or short-term rentals, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of components to that, and I think we shouldn't have any sacred cows when we try to tackle this issue in the medium term. Having said that, I think for tourism, looked at in a purely narrow manner, of course Airbnb is an interesting element.
Ryan, Karen, as people who are constantly on the lookout for stuff, yourself or others, what role do you think Airbnb can play, and is it something that comes up a lot in your day-to-day operations?
I'll go first then. I just agree with Michael's comments, I guess, in terms of looking at everything collectively, but it doesn't necessarily come up in a day-to-day discussion in terms of people finding jobs and finding accommodation. Many of the operators who take on the regional staff do help them try to find adequate accommodation, but I think Airbnb, it was very controversial when it first came out, but I think it has an important role to play in that overall mix. And without Airbnb, I don't suppose we'd be on the global map with a lot of those consumers that are using Airbnb as their preferred method of stay, which I know doesn't help our hoteliers and everything, but I think there's got to be a balance.
Ryan?
I think there's also the link to me, man, and I agree with Michael again, it needs to be looked at in its entirety, it can't be put in isolation. But as a tour operator, there's also the component that Airbnb brings, which is the link to the participant who might come on an activity. So not only are they marketing a place to stay, but they're also marketing things to do in an area. So it provides an additional marketing and distribution channel for tourism businesses, one that allows you to reach directly to the customer, maybe in a different way than you would through our traditional distribution systems, through the travel trade or through the online travel agency. So I think there's an important part for Airbnb to play. We just have to work out a delicate balance to ensure that there's places for people to live, places for people to stay where they choose to stay, because Airbnb does provide that flexibility if there's not traditional accommodation, but it can't be at the expense of having places for people to live, because we need them to work.
Of course, it's got its complications because of it's exacerbating some of the housing issues. But let's go to another question from the floor. This one got 19 thumbs up, so that seems pretty popular. We didn't go for the Commonwealth Games, this person says, but what other large international sporting and cultural events would you like to bring to Perth? And they ask whether Special Olympics might be one. Carolyn Turnbull, let's start with you.
I'm not sure how much I can share on this, but what I can tell you...
We won't tell anyone.
What I can tell you, in line with all of the blockbuster events that you've been seeing come to the state, Jess spoke this morning about the incredible results that we saw from the likes of USC. Our Deputy Premier, Roger Cook, has an extremely strong appetite to build one of the most robust events calendars that Perth and Western Australia has ever seen before. The desirability to become one of the leading events centres within Southeast Asia is very much the thinking behind our strategy. And so whilst some of these larger events we have either gone after before or are considering in the future, all I can provide to you today is the confidence that we're going after really world-class events, both in the arts and culture, in the sporting arena, and in that premium food and wine sector. So really, really excited to share those details as they come to fruition over the next couple of months.
Got any thoughts on that one, Ryan, in terms of major tourist attractions that you think would really help, lure these tourists back?
I certainly do, and we were fortunate enough late last year to participate in the bid for the Special Olympics potentially here in Perth in 2027. This is an event that's very close to my heart. My brother participated not at a national level, but at a local level growing up in Special Olympics. And I guess the unique thing about an event like Special Olympics compared to others is the sheer volume of people that it attracts that are directly associated with the participants. So when something like the Olympics, you get a handful of people, but you can get up to 5 people per participant. So for an event like Special Olympics, it could drive hundreds of thousands of additional visitors to our city. And so I think it's really important. Large events, whether they're UFC and that's something you enjoy, or they're a major concert or a play, whatever it is, they're really important in the overall tourism space, because once people come here, they're looking for other things to do. They spend on food, they spend on accommodation, they spend on tours, and so there's a broad economic benefit from having those events that spreads far beyond just the event itself.
Daniel?
Yeah, I just think to add to that, I think it's important to get a balance here as well, because sometimes the capital investment that's required to attract and have the facilities to then cater for these type of large events, it doesn't always make economic sense. So I think there's been studies by other colleagues at Curtin University that have shown that there's not always a return on these type of investments, particularly if that capital investment outweighs the benefits of additional visitors that come. But of course, it's an important thing that needs to be looked at, and of course, I'm not ruling it out, but that we need to look at both sides of the coin there.
Conscious of the time, so I'm going to move on. There's a poignant line at the start of the report, and you've said it a couple of times today in your presentations, that tourism is everyone's business. Not only do we observe economic spillovers to other industries, tourism impacts the lives of residents. That's why we're here today. But tourism is everyone's business. And it's a line I think that will resonate with many of you here today. And it sort of segues with another line that Karen picked up on in the report, that those working in the tourism sectors were most notably more likely to observe benefits from tourism compared to other workers. Karen, how big an issue is that, and how do we change that? Is there a bigger role that communities can play more broadly, particularly in regional areas, around that?
I think there is still room for improvement. It was really encouraging to see in the report that residents want to be part of what's happening and be informed about tourism. But in many regional areas that I go to, there's still lots of people who say to me, oh, you know, we don't need too many tourists here, or I'm not in tourism. And Kitty, I can see you nodding. You know, and I'm like, you're in retail, you're in tourism, people are coming into your shop, etc. So I really think, and I really love that line, tourism's everyone's business. And I think I'd really love to see the community of Western Australia embrace it and say, you know, become advocates and ambassadors for tourism, because we all benefit from it at some level. And so I think there's more to be done, but it's on the right track.
Probably we've got time for one more. And Ryan, the report talks about WA's many strengths as a potential tourism destination, and it says that in order to capitalise on these, we need to further enhance government attention to tourism as an area for economic diversification. How important do you think that economic diversification is to your mind? What needs to happen to achieve that?
Well, it is incredibly important. I don't want to have WA forever be known as a place where we dig stuff up out of the ground. I would much rather have people appreciate and be WA known for its amazing Aboriginal culture, for its incredible tourism attractions, for incredible nature. These are the things that I think are they're equally or have a greater importance than other sectors of the economy. So I think diversification is incredibly important. The benefits that it provides, and this is, I guess, one of the things I always talk about when it comes to tourism, particularly international tourism, that it's unlike any other sector where people travel to our country and they deposit their money into our country and then they just leave it behind. And so by increasing the number of people that come here, or the value that they leave in the country here, it's just one of those things that has a benefit far beyond anything else that we do. So I just think it's really important that we continue to diversify, and tourism is a key component of that. There's obviously other sectors like the other service sectors, technology and things, but I think tourism plays an incredible part in that, and that if we can attract people out here for other reasons, that they also become advocates, as Karen is saying, for their friends and family to travel here. So it becomes sort of a circular thing where it just continues to deliver impact to our economy.
Carolyn, Tim, I might finish there with you on that. Economic diversification is obviously critical. What more can we do?
Well, I think what's fantastic to see is that tourism is front and centre in the government's Diversify WA strategies. So tourism is being taken seriously. We also heard from Jess this morning that the $167 million budget is the highest of all time. So I think that's a real indication that tourism is being taken seriously. We see it as not just benefits from leisure travellers, we see it as a whole of economy benefit as well. So I think you'll start to see the details built out in our WA visitor economy strategy over the next couple of months, where we're working across government and with key industry stakeholders to really understand those broader benefits. To Ryan's point around particularly the international visitors that are leaving significant economic deposits in our economy here, the international travellers are spending the most, and I think at the moment they are the smallest level of arrivals. So it's our intention to ensure that we're building on the international arrivals to make sure that we are attracting the biggest bang for our buck.
Thanks very much to all of you who submitted questions to the panel. Thanks to the students for their question. And thank you very much to all of you today for your time on the panel. As you're making your way back, can we please give them a round of applause as the panellists exit the stage? Thank you. Professor Vanessa Chang, Pro Vice-Chancellor, Business and Law at Curtin University, who's going to deliver the official vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I'd like to start by thanking Sandra Haben, she's left now, but for that beautiful welcome to country and the language the few words that we've learned this morning. We have learned from today's presentation just how much the tourism industry is integral to the broader economic development and success of our great state of Western Australia. Fundamentally, tourism fulfills the innate human desire to explore the soul of a region, a state, or a country. From the historical stories of the Indigenous people, as we've heard, to the vibrancy of Western Australia, there is something there for everyone. And as we have heard, the slogan, the tagline, as we will all leave here this morning is, tourism is everyone's business. And we've also heard that not only do we observe both positive and the risk, positive and negative economic impacts into other industries such as education, housing and others, but tourism impacts the livelihood of residents in Western Australia. And we've also heard there are immense and tremendous opportunities to increase short-term accommodation for tourists and to also overcome shortage of long-term accommodation for workforce, both local and international skilled talent and international students. Our industry and economy will only flourish as a result of our visitors making WA the choice of destination. It is fantastic to showcase the talent and expertise of researchers from Curtin University, so thank you to Dr. Daniel Kiley, Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre, and Associate Professor Michael Volger, Curtin Tourism Research Cluster, and the entire authoring team for their work in highlighting such an important topic. Thank you to our panellists, Carolyn Turnbull, Ryan Mosney, Karen Priest, Daniel and Michael, for their perceptive insights on a topic they are so passionate about. Thank you to the student who's asked that important question as well. Thank you to Jessica Shaw, MLA, Parliamentary Secretary, to the Deputy Premier, Minister for Tourism, for your opening remarks and for all the stats that we have to all go out and learn and remember. Thank you to Bankwest Executive General Manager Jason Chand and the entire Bankwest team for your continued support of the Centre's important agenda. Can you please join me in thanking our speakers? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Professor Chang. Thanks to all of you for attending today. What better way to kick off your Friday morning in such a beautiful venue, overlooking a beautiful spot in Western Australia with some great research. Don't forget to visit the BCEC website. It's bcec.edu.au for this report and also all of the other reports that the Centre puts out. Don't pack up yet, I've got a really important point here. The next BCEC event will be on housing affordability in early May. Highly topical, not to be missed. So keep an eye out for more details on that. Thank you. Have a lovely day as you go your own way. Thank you.
Hoy tan hueco.